Hello and welcome to another Lumen Podcast. I'm so happy to be here with a good friend of mine, Jamie Pujara, EO Global Chair. And I met him through the path of leadership of the entrepreneurs organizations. For those of you who don't know, EO is the most influential network of founders and entrepreneurs in the world with more than 220 chapters represented in 68 countries and 18,000 members, with a median revenue of $4 million and over 5 million employees. Jamie is from the EO Kenya chapter and is the first African to hold this leadership position ever. Today, we will be speaking of his origins, how he became an entrepreneur, his experience in the restaurant, technology, real estate, and development industries. Welcome, Jamie.
Thank you. Thank you.
And by the way, we're in Bahrain. We just came out of our board meeting after 3 days, and it's been amazing being able to travel around the world, serving for a cause, and growing as always in this beautiful organization. Jamie, tell us a little bit about your background. How was your childhood like growing up in Kenya?
Yeah, so I was born and raised in Kenya, 1981. Kenya in the 1980s was an amazing place to grow up. Again, just very family oriented for me. I was my mother is Chinese and my father is Indian. My mother's side of the family was also a part of a family business, so I have some cousins who are about the same age. And because it was a family business that both parents worked in, I felt I saw my cousins all the time, I saw my family all the time. Family time is a big thing, and when you're in a restaurant, eating is a big thing. So there's a lot of meals together and a lot of moments that I really cherish. I was very close with my grandparents, and I have very fond memories of them early on. My grandmother, who I was very attached to, she took me on my first international trip when I was 6. She passed away when I was 9, but she loved to entertain, and there was always people at the house, and I always have really fond memories from the 80s. In the 90s, I think Kenya as an economy, as a country, was going through a lot, moving into government from a government perspective, moving from a single party to a multi-party democracy. Things maybe that I didn't really understand, but I could feel the effects in school. Crime was on the increase. There was a lot of instability. I could see a lot of, again, not really understanding the economy, but I could see hard times were coming in our household, right? Like just being a little bit more frugal, struggling a little bit more. So it was a really interesting time. But then again, I think as it started to pick up towards the end, we came through that, and it was amazing. And people always talk about your childhood as a fun time, and it really is. Some of my childhood friends are still my friends today, and it's an amazing experience.
Being from Guatemala, I think we relate and we have a lot of commonalities.
Yeah.
I guess, in Guatemala, I went to a private school. Probably a lot of my friends and cousins also went to private schools. I don't know if it was the same in Kenya.
Yeah, I went to a private school in Kenya, and again, very much the same. So very international, very mixed in terms of the makeup of the school. A lot of good exposure, which I think was really interesting. I guess the interesting thing then, I remember growing up, the idea was you wouldn't come back to Kenya. And I think that was a shift. So you were almost primed, we're sending you to private school, we're paying a lot of fees. The idea is you will do your schooling here, you will go to the UK or Canada or Australia or America if your parents can afford it, and then ideally don't come back because there'll be very little for you to do here.
Oh my God.
And so the change afterwards has been really interesting.
Regarding study, did you go to university? What was your major in?
I did. I went to university in England. So I went to the University of Warwick, just outside of Coventry. I studied economics and then switched to management sciences.
Nice. How did this study play a role in what you do now?
I don't know if it played a role in terms of study. I was having this debate with my wife the other day about what does university actually prepare you for, right? So I think there's the course that you do, but I think there's so much more in that. So I think learning, and again, in today's world, you can get learning anywhere. You can get learning from, technology has made it so accessible. I think the experience of university is where I really learned, right? Because I think there is a part you leave home, you are living with different people, you're socializing, you're really starting to find yourself and your interests, and again, being exposed to so much more. And I think I take that. So I think I take, what helped me, I think, develop as a leader, what helped me shape some of my views, my interactions with, my university friends who have now also become my lifelong friends, I think that is really what prepared me.
biggest value.
Yeah, and then really understanding, right, your aptitude for learning. So of course, what you learn at university is what you learn at university, but it's really teaching you how to learn, which I think is interesting from where I was, and I think it then propelled me onwards. After leaving the university in the UK, I spent a couple of years in Japan, and then I lived a couple of years in New York before moving back. And I see those as an accumulation of learning and what shaped me to who I am today.
I remember you told me when we were in Japan that you had taught in Japan.
Yeah.
Share to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I was doing university in the UK, and in the summer months I would intern. My second year I interned at HSBC, and again because I was studying economics and management, and I was thinking, oh, this would be probably the career path that I would get into, but I really didn't like that internship. And so when it came to apply for jobs, I was hesitating and not really doing it wholeheartedly in what I wanted to do. And then come the end of the year, I don't have a job, and my parents are calling me on the phone. They're like, well, what are you going to do? And I'm like, I don't know. And then they're like, well, you're coming back to Kenya, and I have a Kenyan passport. If you have a Kenyan passport, to live anywhere or be anywhere is very difficult. And I was like, oh, I don't know if I'm ready to do that. I want to experience something. So I remember getting, at the time, newspapers, going through all the ads, what could I do? And there was an opportunity to teach in Japan. And I did it just because I didn't want to go back. And so I signed up to be an English teacher in Japan, teaching English as a second language. And then, I went for training, and a few months later, I find myself in a language school in Tokyo that taught everybody from kids who were like 6 years old. I think my youngest was actually 2, all the way to people learning English, students who were learning English for school, business people who were learning English because they wanted to improve their business life. Housewives was a big market, and then retired people who wanted to talk to their grandkids, for example, who had emigrated. And I ended up spending 2 years in Japan, which was a very impactful time for me. So it was great. And what I learned through the teaching again was also, I joke now, people always say, what would you do if money was no object, what would you do, or where does your passion lie? And I think somewhere in teaching is where I feel I'm super passionate about.
I bet it has to do a lot with being in service of others.
Maybe, I think so. I've never thought of it that way, but maybe you're right. I think I find passion in service, so there is something that links it there.
What was your key takeaway from living in Japan?
Externally, I have so much appreciation for the country and the culture. It's one of the few places, and again, I think I came, maybe I was too early, I was straight out of university. It's one of the countries that I go back to every time, and I see something new and I see something more. So one of my key takeaways is that even when you are in the moment, be open to experiencing more, because you don't realize how much you are missing in that space. And I wish I could go back and replay some of those years, because like I said, I was so immature at the time that, I'd go to work and then afterwards I'd want to go out party and have a drink, right? But I wasn't open to really taking advantage of where I was and trying to understand more. So I feel like I missed a window of opportunity in that part. The second thing I say, the learning and the key takeaway I'd say is that the ability to communicate. So not speaking Japanese when I first got there, probably not doing great even while I was there, but understanding even without language, how are we able to communicate, to form friendships, to make things work, I think was important.
What's it like doing business in Kenya, starting businesses as well? What's different from other markets that you have experienced?
So after Japan, I moved to New York, and I was working in New York, and then I came back to Kenya by accident, right? So my father was sick, and he had cancer treatment, and he had to go to cancer, and he called me and said, I'm sick, you're going to need to come and help. And so that's how I ended up coming back to Kenya. The first thing that struck me is there is reverse culture shock. When you live away from your home country and you come back, and again, the difference between Kenya and then living in the UK and Japan, the way things are done is very different. So I think, to your point, you'd asked me earlier, what did education prepare me for? And I say, the way of working there did not prepare me for way of working back home. So I had to kind of readapt and reclimatize and say, okay, how do things work here? And the challenges of navigating a system that is not as straightforward, so to speak. And then I think the growing up part of it, right? I think it was non-traditional. So I'd come back and I'm in a family business, and it's a gift and a curse. You are given this opportunity, but at the same time you kind of bypass a lot of things. So you kind of have to learn quickly in the job, and I think those were my big takeaways. How again do I integrate with my staff? Do I lead my staff? there was without so much of the training. How do I do things in the system, and trying to understand that was interesting from that perspective.
So the restaurant is Tintin Restaurant.
Correct. Yeah.
And how long has Tintin Restaurant been in business?
It opened in 1978, so it's the first Chinese restaurant in Nairobi.
Wow.
And my grandfather has this amazing story. So it's my grandfather from my Chinese side, whose surname is Tin. But when you put the Chinese characters together, Tintin, it means open daily. And anyway, he has an amazing story. He left Hong Kong when he was 16 years old by himself. He was escaping the war. And he was on a boat, and the boat took him out of Hong Kong to Mumbai, Bombay. He stayed on the boat. He didn't like it there. And the boat ended up in Mombasa, which is a coastal town in Kenya. And then the ship captain said to him, I'm going back the same way. So it's either you get off here or we're heading back. And so that's how he ends up in Kenya. And then he meets my grandmother, who's a daughter of another immigrant family, Chinese family there. And they get married, and they live in Mombasa. They have 4 kids, my mother being the youngest of the 4. And when they retire, he's working in the shipyard, like as an apprentice, and then eventually working in shipping and repairing. And when he retires, they open a restaurant. And then there's an opportunity to open a restaurant in Nairobi. And so that's what they do. And it was started off as a post-retirement scheme. My grandmother would be in the kitchen and he would be front of house, and then became a family business. And then, it started from there. And that's what it is still today, still there.
So adapting to that culture, to the whole culture, you taking over the restaurant, that must have been interesting as well.
Yeah, I think coming back into the restaurant is interesting, right? So I think, so I came back in 2008. I don't think I ever wanted to be in the restaurant business. I think that was also really hard. So it's part of my childhood. It's part of something I was adapted to, but it was never something I felt passionate for. So like I said, I think I came back. And when I say that, the gift and the curse, it was like I feel very privileged that I had this opportunity, but at the same time, I feel like I didn't really have a choice.
Yeah.
But yeah, we came back and the business has changed. We still have the restaurant, which is there, and I think it's an amazing for legacy. And it's because of, like I say, the first one there. But we really then kind of moved away from restauranting to do more catering, and catering now becoming the core business, while the restaurant is still open.
Is catering like different types of food, not only Chinese, or is?
Yeah, the different types of food. So we're affiliated, or we're close to a conference center. So we do things, conference catering, exhibition catering, meeting catering. And so, we have a whole team that does everything from continental menus to Indian cuisine to Chinese cuisine to Italian, and like the whole shebang. If you go for a conference, there is a tea break, lunch, afternoon tea, cocktail, dinner. So that's what we do now as our core business.
Was that an innovation that you started?
Yeah, maybe. I think it was I think there was parts that were happening there, and I think we tried to professionalize that part of it. And again, maybe more so through my own selfish reasons rather than through passion. So one, like I said, I think I have a lot of respect for people who run restaurants, but I think for me it works when you are passionate and you are there and you're doing it. And it takes a lot of sacrifice.
I know that industry is very sacrificed. You have to be there like at difficult times, maybe at night, maybe on weekends.
Yeah.
And probably there's a lot of rotation. I don't know if it was the same with you, but it's and you have to take care of so many different things, right? It's not only one product, but it's like service, the music, the ambience, the product in itself.
Yeah, it's a lot. And I think I had memories of, how hard it was for my parents and I guess my uncle, right? Because to you say it's weekends, it's nights, it's a lot of time away, right? So I remember as a kid, for example, if I wake up to go to school, my father would still be asleep because he had to work late the night before to close the restaurant. And so I don't see him in the morning. And then when I come back from school, maybe we overlap for a couple of hours. And then as I'm having dinner, he sits with us, with me and my sister for a while. It's a quick small talk, and then he has to go to work. I started, I think maybe there's some baggage I carried when I started my own family that I'm like, I have to think of a way to do this different because I want to be a little bit more available. And again, I think having that opportunity, I totally respect my father because that was what he had to do. But, if you could have a choice, that was something that I think played in my mind. And so, hey, maybe we can do catering, which I think is a little bit different. Of course, you still have to create great product, create great food menus, but I think there's something easier or more mechanical or more methodical in the planning, in the system, in doing it, right? Which is less so than the whole orchestra of a restaurant coming together.
Tell us a little bit about how Byon Kenya started. ByronKenya.com.
Yeah, ByronKenya.com. So I'll fast forward a little bit. So I'm back in Kenya in 2008. My father passes away in 2011. And in 2011, it's my uncle and I who are running it. And I think, again, just, a little bit of struggle on my side. And again, I blame myself, a little bit of immaturity of how do I now work in a family business when my father is not there and kind of butting heads. And so I kind of step away and say to my uncle, look, you run the business, and let me try something else. And maybe also selfishly, like I say, it's not my passion. What can I do? Byon Kenya is an idea to help people find property. Not a new idea. It's in all over the world, but it wasn't existing in Kenya. And a university friend of mine, Nicholas Adamji, he lives in Mauritius, but I met him at university, came to my wedding in 2011, and we started talking about this idea. And literally, it's one of those back of the napkin stories where we're at a coffee shop and we're like, hey, why don't we do this? And the next day he goes and registers the name. And 6 months later, he's like, hey, Jamie, are you serious about doing this? And I'm like, yeah, sure, let's do it. None of us are tech people. None of us know how to code. None of us know how to do anything. So we sit ourselves in a room with A3 pieces of paper and we're like, this is what the homepage should look like. This is what this, and, looking at different sites. This is how it should work. And we find a guy to build us this site. And I think we're very naive. We think this will just work automatically. We think we're doing a public service, like, helping people find property. Because again, I think it was one of my pain points when I came back. How do you find property? And back then, I don't know what the experience was in Guatemala, but back then, pre-internet, you would see a sign at a notice board and you'd call this number and you call this guy and you say, hey, I want a 3-bedroom in this area with, these amenities. And he'll say, okay, cool, pick me up at this roundabout. And you'd pick him up and then you'd go in your car and then he'd show you a thing and he'd show you the wrong thing. And, it was a very frustrating process. So then we started it up, we launched it. And I think it started from being a 1 hour a week to a 2 hour a week to a 4 hour a week to realizing that, oh my gosh, this is going to be my full-time job. And then telling my uncle, listen, I need to step out a little bit more to focus on this.
How did that develop?
The Byon Kenya? It went really quickly. I think in 6 months we became the number one property portal in the country. We found out there was an existing one. In 6 months we overtook them in all metrics. Our team started to grow. And then I think at about the 12-month part, it became, people started to notice. Kenya at the time was going through a technology hype, so to speak. So Rocket Internet were coming in. There was NASPers from South Africa coming in, two large companies that were now going to bring their own property models in. And so my co-founder and I were like, okay, we're going to need to accelerate our growth for where we are. So then we went on a fundraising tour around the world, being more involved, connected with the international property scene, property portal scene. So started to meet a lot more people, started to get a little bit more insights, and then raised some capital to then help propel us for the fight ahead.
You had a lot of recognitions. One of them was 40 under 40 men in business in Kenya, 30 most promising young entrepreneurs in Africa, 2016 and 17. Tell me a little bit about those.
Yeah, we had a very good PR team. It's not me. No, I'm kidding. Look, I think it's funny, right? Like, I think looking back, it's always nice to be recognized for what you do. But it's just one thing on a belt, right? Like, I think you just continue. The next day you get up and you go on and you keep moving. It should never be enough to be able to do that. And again, I appreciate it, but the success is never one person. It's always a team behind us that does it.
I love how you were so humble. You also won the Mark Lincoln Award, which is the highest honor that you can receive from the Entrepreneurs Organization. Yeah. And I remember, and correct me if I'm wrong, that it was when you were regional chair. Yeah. And COVID hit, and you called every member from the MEPA, Middle East, Pakistan, and Africa region, which must have been over 1,000 calls probably.
Yeah, so COVID as a EO member, as an EO leader, was a very difficult time. So to your point, I was a regional chair at the time, and COVID hit, and kind of the world shut down. I remember being very passionate at that time about this idea that we should not leave someone behind. That EO has to be there for you, not only in your good times, but more importantly in your bad times. And this was something that was unprecedented that we were facing. And again, in developing countries or global South countries, as we say, you don't really get a lot of help from the government. And as entrepreneurs, I think that weighs a lot on you because it's also not just your livelihood. If I close my restaurant, if I close one of my businesses, the number of families it affects and the knock-on effect is huge. So I think I was going through a lot of emotional pressure myself because my businesses were failing, and then I was trying to be a leader in an organization and to stand up for those people who didn't have a voice at the global level. And so I was very vocal on calls with the global board, and I hope respectful as well, but with the global board and with the CEO at the time, really pushing for what then became the Together Fund, that they would take money out of reserves to help members. And I was also very clear that it shouldn't just be blanket, it should be very precise for those who need it the most. But of course, for those who need it the most, you have to do the legwork and you have to really understand, you can't just paint a brush and say everyone is suffering. Because some people were benefiting. Some businesses took off. If you were in medical supplies, your business was doing well, for instance, right?
Problems were inventory. You didn't have enough to sell probably, but revenue was high.
Yeah, exactly. So building the structure, and again, I get the Mark Lincoln Award, but the amazing staff of the regional council, the amazing members of the regional council, they all played their part in helping me get that. So yeah, it was a shock when I found out. If you look at the Mark Lincoln Award recipients, it's usually someone at the end of their journey. So I don't know if it was a wink, wink, nod, nod. Jamie, thank you, you're good. Now go sail off into the sunset, right? Like you're done with your time. So
I'll retire now.
Yeah, retire now. So to have that before my journey with the global board is unique. It doesn't usually happen.
How did you learn about EO?
Oh yeah, that was during my Byon Kenya days. So I was pitching. I wanted to pitch to this client. He had the biggest agency in Kenya, and I was like preparing with my team. Okay, this is it. This is the sell point. This is option A. If he goes here, option B. And really in my head, had run all the scenarios. And we meet him. We meet in a hotel, a little bit like this, and we're doing some small talk chatting. Hey, how are you? And hey, how are you doing? You look really good. And that's how I started. And he's like, you think so? Let me tell you why. And he started telling me about this organization that he joined. And he was so serious. He was like, I do, right? Like, Jamie, my health has improved and my personal, and I have a personal board. It's called a forum. And I meet with them once a month. And, they help me in my personal life. And I'm listening and I'm like, yeah. And I'm looking at my watch being like, we only have an hour. Like, when is he going to let me talk about work? Eventually we get rushed. So I only have 15 minutes and I feel like I've blown this pitch. We leave. And then he called me later and he says, hey, Jamie, that organization I told you about, can you send me your CV? And I'm like, I don't want to work for them. He's like, no, send me your CV. I want you to join them. And I was like, okay. So anyway, I go to a test drive, which is a member recruitment. They tell you a little bit about EO and they put us in mini forums to create that experience. And I was open. I shared, look, I'm having this problem. I think it was HR. I was struggling with one of my employees, and I was like, this is a problem that I'm going through. And I got some experience shares around the table in this format. And I said, okay, this maybe could be interesting, could help me. And I signed up straight away. I joke they fast-tracked my application because I'm a diversity candidate. I'm Chinese Indian too. So they're like, we're looking for diversity. Here you go. Welcome in. So yeah, that's where we are. And that was the start of my EO journey. And I always say, because we were a small chapter, I think I was member number 27. Very very quickly I became part of leadership in that chapter and really embraced it full on. This idea of it's a gym, not a spa resonates, right? Like that mindset that, hey, I'm going to go to the gym every day. So I'm going to go to every learning event. I'm going to go to every forum event. I'm going to immerse myself fully in this experience to get the most out of it.
So it's interesting. You say that you came into the POL really quickly. And Path of Leadership, it's something that EO has that is kind of like a sub-product, but it's something really valuable where the organization depends on its members to function. It's led by its members and a great team of professional staff as well. But there's so many members that share their time and are passionate about working alongside their peers. What has Path of Leadership been for you? And share us a little bit of how it started and the path itself.
Okay, so yeah, great summary of Path of Leadership. So Path of Leadership for me started obviously at chapter level first. So I joined the chapter. I'm member number 27. At the time, we don't have a GSEA program, and GSEA is a Global Student Entrepreneur Award. So an event that EO runs to find the best studentpreneur. And so I started up in Kenya, and then very very quickly they're like, hey, will you be the learning chair next year? I think everyone who goes in passive leadership can relate to two things. So one is this idea of being voluntold. You're not volunteering for it, you're being asked to do it. You're being told to do this. And then a moment in your life where you are told to do leadership and you struggle because you start to think to yourself, is the commitment am I going to be able to manage the commitment? Learning chair is a big responsibility for any chapter. So I'm like, okay, can I be a learning chair? Can I still run my business? Can I still go to forum? Can I still spend time with my family? And then the pressure, can I do this role justice? Because if your learning calendar is not great, if your learning events are not great, it impacts chapter health. And I remember speaking to my president at the time, the president-elect, and saying, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I'm the right guy. I'm too new in the system. I'm too young. I need to focus on my business. And he said to me, he's like, if you ever need to leave. But don't walk away from giving it a chance.
A great takeaway.
Great takeaway. Ritesh was my president. I think you know him. He's a wonderful leader, wonderful human. And so I said yes. And then we went to my first GLC, which was Bangkok. I think there is a moment, every EO member, every EO leader will remember their first GLC, because it really takes you out of your chapter and understanding it's a global organization. So I remember standing in the hall in Bangkok and going, oh, wow. Like, this is a global organization.
I was there probably. We saw each other at that event.
Yeah, and the vibe at the GLC is amazing, right? So
you feel the energy.
So I come back as a buzz, and I think my learning year was really, really great. I took it to a whole level of what I wanted to do, and small things, really focusing on how to make it better. Ironically, David Nielsen was the facilitator or the trainer, the subject matter expert. So I learned a lot of my tricks about learning from him.
And now we share with him at the global board.
And now we sit on the global board together. And yeah, so I think I got a lot of domestic recognition for my time as learning chair. I was asked to become the president. At the president's meet, as an elect, I was told to share with the other presidents of Europe and MEPA how to build out learning calendars, how to put structure into learning. So that was good. And then so I became president in the year after. Probably the most interesting role. I always tell people, for me personally, it was the most difficult. But difficult because I learned so much about myself in that role. Who I am as a leader, how I show up as a leader. So, and I think when you lead in your business, it's one thing. When you lead your peers, it's very different. And so as a president, I think I went through the most learning, the most ups and downs, the most stress, because I think you carry that burden of responsibility, but at the same time, the most gratifying, right, when you come out of it.
So thank you for that share. POL is amazing, and I'm glad that we were able to hear your experience on it. For up and coming entrepreneurs on that path, I think will be most valuable. Tell me about how was your experience becoming chairman? Is it something that you said, I want to be the chairman, or is it something that happened in a certain way?
No, not at all. I used to joke that from the beginning, I never wanted to be a chair. But again, POL, if you take POL, I never think I look at the next one. I think I'm very much in the moment. I'm also a big believer in this organization that title is title. It doesn't really mean anything. I think it's more about, for me, it's the value of serving. When I was at GLC in Singapore, a lot of people would say to me, are you excited about your year? What are you going to do with your year? And I keep saying to them, it's my year as chair, but it's your year as learning chair, or it's your year as forum chair, or your year as moderator, or your year as president. It is collectively our year. And it's not about what I'm going to do, it's about what do we do in fiscal year 24-25. And that's how I like to think about it. And so, when I joined the global board in 2022, I had young kids. I remember even at the time at my application, I said in the application, I was like, I don't even know if I will stay the whole time, because I might be moving to Europe, which I did moving to Europe. And these are all concerns for me. And I think part of it is, one, I never thought I could do it, is part of me, or what do I have to offer in the role? I'm happy being a board member. And I think it was really in Cape Town GLC that I came to the decision that I would put my name in the hat. And it's our dear friend Hugo who told me, he's like, if you were not going to put your name, if you're not going to apply, then you shouldn't have applied for the board, because if you apply for the board, you should be at any time be prepared to be a chair in 3 years. That's the mindset we should have. And
Hugo pressuring, I love it. Hugo Salinas from Monterrey.
Hugo Salinas, yeah. And, I've had wonderful memories with Hugo. We were regional chairs together. We served that time. And so, when he said that, it really made me think. I was like, you are right. It's really not about me. And I think everything in leadership is sometimes not about you, right? Like, it's always about also what do you give and what does the organization need? And if it's not me, it's not me. I'll be okay with it. And so I decided to put my name in. And I was sitting next to you when it was announced. I remember in the boardroom, you were the first person who reached over to congratulate me. So yeah, it was a very surreal moment. It's definitely been the biggest stretch, which I'm so grateful for now. I think being 1 year board member, second year as the chair-elect, and now starting my year as the chair, has given me 3 different experiences and 3 big steps that I have had to mentally prepare for and take on. I was talking to somebody just before we came here. I was talking to one of my friends in Kenya, and she's like, how is it now? You've been three months as the chair. How is the travel? And it's funny because you always think it's the physical part, it's the travel. And I'm like, that's fine. It's not that part. It's the mental part. It's being in this position. Again, maybe some of the insecurities from what I talked about when I was president, and now, am I leading correctly? Is the board getting the most? Are we the most effective we can be? Am I holding the room? Are we bringing the right conversations? My interaction with the CEO, and all these things coming together, and how are we building a high-performing board? I think as a chair, you take on that pressure more than anybody. What is the high performance of how we aspire to?
It's amazing because when you go into EO, it's kind of like those things that people tell you that 1 degree is not a lot, but when you multiply that, if you're in a plane or a boat times 1,000 miles, you end up in a completely different position. And I see EO as that.
Yeah.
You come into EO and you move 1 degree, and then 10, 12 years later, whatever, you're in a completely different position. And also leadership, every position is different, right?
Completely.
Maybe when we are president in the chapter, we're thinking, how can we bring value to the people, to my peers in the chapter? And as you move on to the region, and now probably how can I bring the most value to the board meetings? How can I hold accountable each board member, each director, so that we can bring value to the organization? I know I didn't have a lot of board experience. I had participated in past boards before, but I've upped my game. And like you're saying, like you're always thinking, and that mental capacity is a little tiring. And more so if you're questioning yourself, if you're the person to do it, if you're able to do it, and that how they call it, the name,
imposter syndrome.
That one, the imposter syndrome. I felt it more when I was president of the chapter than probably now in the board. But how has that experience been for you? How have you grown as a director in a board? And how has that changed you as a leader?
Yeah, I'll touch on the imposter syndrome because I think what you say is interesting. I think it always happens before, and then when you're in it, I think the mindset is you're already in the deep end, so now you have to swim, right? Like the imposter syndrome is like, oh, can I swim in the deep end? The learning has been really interesting. So one, I always think about. I'll give the example of, in passive leadership, when we're just looking at this hotel, right? So right now we're in the room of the hotel. When you zoom out, someone has to manage the room, then someone has to manage the floor, then someone has to manage the whole building. And I think when you are at the chair, when you see the organization from the whole thing, and the mental part is, what is the prioritization? What is the most important thing we have to fix, given the short time we have? And then how do we allocate and align and bring those conversations for us to have there? What is really governance? What is really a high-performing board? I think those are the things that I think about all the time to really make this year count. Is the part I go through. I think in terms of my own journey, I would say learning is always key. It's the ability to learn and to be able to implement quickly. I'm very grateful for the education that being on this role has given us, both formal and informal. Informal being the ability to have seen my predecessors in the boardroom, speaking to them, and I talk to them, the ex-chairs. How did you handle this? How did you do this? Even ex-board members, right, who I consider mentors to really help me think through some things. And then in the formal setting, our learnings at IMD in Lausanne were great. The 2 courses I went there to really put a structure in place of what we are trying to...
Like putting a benchmark, right? That was amazing takeaway.
Yeah, to put a benchmark of what it is, and a structure in terms of where are the pillars we should be focusing on, and then always checking in. I'm someone, I want feedback, and I always believe in improvement. I always believe we can always get better at everything we do, whether that's my business, myself as a father, as a spouse, as a person. I always think to myself, where can I get better, right? So I really appreciate the feedback. Sometimes, no matter how brutal it is, I feel like, well, that's good because it gives me something to think about.
And feedback is a gift, right?
I think so, yeah.
In a rapidly changing world, how do you encourage innovation within EO? How do you see the organization evolving over the next few years?
Oh, this is an interesting one. I'll give you my personal take, not as the chair. I'll give you what I believe as an individual.
Please.
I think it's a great topic that we have to discuss with the board, but I don't want to speak for the board because we haven't had the discussion. So what I believe is that innovation is going to happen, but I think the true gift in EO is the innovation of the member. So when we talk about member value, I believe that some of it will come from the organization and some of it will come from members. We have such amazing communities. I talked about it at GLC, the psychedelics group, the biohacking group, the dads group. Like there's so many groups out there where member-led who are creating so much value for members. In an organization, I think we will only be able to do so much, and then members have to pile on top. So I'd like to think of it in terms of infrastructure and then the ability for people to come in. So if you take if you take like an empty piece of land and you create serviced plots, what you do is you'd build the road network, you'd connect the electricity, connect the water, but then you would ask other people, okay, you buy this plot and you build a shop or you build this. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Rather than me, we could do 2 things. I could build the whole thing, or I could just build the structure and then maybe I build a couple of things and then other people build around it. Interesting, we're in Bahrain Bay. So Safa was telling us that this is all owned by the king. This hotel is owned by a group that he's associated with, but then all the other parts are owned differently everywhere. And I think of that in EO. So I think we have to think about how do we unleash innovation in the organization through members as well as through the core team.
I love it, and I want to go back to another part of your experience because it's really valuable, the different parts of innovation or entrepreneurial journey that you've had, and you have also been in a developer.
Yeah.
How did you come into that? Talking about land and whatever.
This was COVID brain. So I was doing Byon in Kenya. Like I said, we raised some rounds of investment and then we got acquired. So we sold out, and then I went back into the restaurant industry. My uncle now retires, and so I come back in and I take over, and we now go full throttle on the catering. So we developed the catering arm even more completely, and then we start to develop sub catering location. So our goal is to take over all the offices in Kenya. So doing now low cost food or food at a low cost price bracket that could be affordable for the majority of people. So you need certain volumes to make it work, and to get certain volumes you need certain locations and catchment areas and so on and so forth. And we do all this, and then COVID happens, and one by one I get calls being like, we're closing the office down, we're closing the lease. So can I get out of my lease? Because now what do I do? So that kind of like sinks down, and COVID is a long game, and I'm like, okay, now what do I do? And someone who I'd known during my Byon Kenya days talks to me about a project. He was already in the building side of it, but he'd left his company, and so he has a skill set that I don't have. And I'm like, sure, I'm interested, but I'm interested in this location because of what the data was showing me from the search data that I had. And so we decided to do it. I call it COVID brain because in my head I think it was easy to do, but again, probably a super challenging for a first time thing. It's my first project. It's 65 units that we've built. We finished it now.
It's a building, Aspire Heights.
Yeah, Aspire Heights, exactly. So it's a residential building in Nairobi, 2 and 3 bedroom apartments, and so we built 65 units that we're just handing over now.
This was during COVID.
We started towards I guess the initiation started in COVID, and then just as we were coming out of COVID, we broke ground, and went now through that cycle to build this.
Nice. talking about the characteristics that define an entrepreneurial mindset, and you were talking about it like my COVID brain, because when you get excited about a project, you're like, yeah, sure, let's do it, let's go in. And when you're in, you're like, oh my God, what did I get myself into?
Yeah.
How can members cultivate this mindset through their involvement with EO?
How can they cultivate a mindset of entrepreneurship? Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
I'm a big believer in energy. So I think when you're around peers and you're around inspiring people and you're around vulnerable people who share, I think that is always the greatest lesson. I think, if you scroll through Instagram, everything looks rosy, or TikTok. I think what EO does uniquely, because of how we can speak to each other openly and share our deepest fears as well, comes a level check part, right? But also inspiration. And I think any great story is only great because there's a low point for it. So I think those are really important. And I say that because I think, in my experience, the times I feel most entrepreneurial are at 2 points. Either when I am super confident and things are going really well, and then I think I am untouchable and anything I touch will turn to gold. Let's do this business. Let's do that business and I can do it. And the other time is when things are really low. But that one comes from a different place. That comes from a place of survival, where it's like, I need to be entrepreneurial to break through the things that are in front of me now. But I feel those are 2 points of where I have to be the most entrepreneurial I am. I think if you're in the low 10 to 30%, that's probably the darkest zone, because that's where you feel everything is closing in on you. And when COVID for me in the beginning felt like that. I really struggled. I go back to that time and I was so reactionary to everything. And I went through a really difficult emotional period. I remember crying, I remember breaking down, thinking, oh, I'm going to lose everything. I'm going to lose the restaurant, I'm going to lose all my staff and all their families. And I just couldn't see a way out. And I couldn't think entrepreneurially. Only when you get to rock bottom, then you find it. You find that strength. It's like being like the equivalent to, like I was saying, in the river when you're drowning and then you're like, there's nothing else for you to do but kick.
I take value from what you said about the people you hang out with. There's a Spanish saying that goes, "Dime con quién andas y te diré quién eres," which translates roughly to, "Tell me who you are with and I'll tell you who you are."
Yeah, love that.
And they say that you become 100% of the 5 people you hang out with. If you're in a group with 5 smokers, you're going to be the 6th smoker. If you're in a group with 5 people who do sports, you're going to do sports. And I love that about EO, because you're in a group of peers who probably didn't know when you came into the group, and it's your forum. And in your forum, they don't tell you what to do, but they share experiences of how they handle things. Yeah. And you think, oh, wow, I didn't know that was a possibility. So you get options.
Yeah.
And in that sense, I feel that throughout the values of the organization, in a way, we raise trust. And you know what Warren Buffett said, that trust business happens at the speed of trust.
That's so interesting.
So I feel that the organization raises business possibilities worldwide because it deepens trust.
Yeah.
And in that sense, how is your forum helped you? Have you been in one same forum? Have you moved from different forums? How has the forum experience been for you?
I've been in one forum pretty much my whole time. We've had members come and go as the circle of life, but I think each of them, even the ones who've left, like so impactful for the moments they're there. Since I joined the global board and since I became chair, it's we stopped having forum just because the commitment was too much. I hope we'll restart next year when I'm have a little bit more free time. I still talk to them, and I think those friendships are always going to be there. But yeah, I agree with you. I think the forum experience, especially in your darkest moments, or in those moments where you want to change it, the accountability that it can hold for you at different times. Is it accountability? Is it a shoulder to cry on? Is it someone to pick you up? Is it someone to guide you? Forum is all that. It's yeah, I agree. It's a very powerful thing that we have.
I experienced the Entrepreneurial Master's Program at MIT.
Yeah.
And there's a night that they call the Night of the Living Dead.
Okay.
Where you're vulnerable, and they share that you share like your hardest experience that you had, something that you thought you were going to die, or something that you said, I'm not going to get out of this. Is there an experience that you could share with us where you seemed at that possibility and how you came out of it?
I'm trying to think what would be the most
because like you say, people go to social media and Instagram and everything looks great. Oh, Jamie, he's the chair or whatever, but they don't see, all the failures maybe that one goes through to be able to get to that position.
Yeah, I think it's true. I think the one that most recent is obviously COVID, right? Like, what I was explaining, I think there were moments where I was like, it'll just be easier to file for bankruptcy, and I started reading into what that would mean. It was so close, like it was really reading into.
So you were investigating about it.
Yeah, I was reading. So what does that mean, right? So in Kenya, if you file for bankruptcy, okay, your company goes, and then you cannot be a director in another company, and all these thoughts. And then, like I said, I think from a business sense, I was so close to doing it. Emotionally, I was like, my employees depend on me, right? Like, what do I do about them? How do I make sure that at least I've taken care of all their severances and all their gratuities that they're owed? And then if I lose the company and I lose, I'm okay. But I was already experiencing that. And I think emotionally that was tough. That was also emotional, like failure, right? Like, again, I blamed myself because I'm like, I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready and I didn't know how to react. I'd be on calls with EO members and people and listening, seeing how people were pivoting their businesses. People who were doing A were all of a sudden doing B to survive. And I just couldn't move. I had paralysis. I was stuck. And yeah, I think that was a deep, dark moment for me because it also just took a lot of my confidence away, where I started not to believe in myself. And I think that's probably the hardest part of that journey from it.
I relate so much with it because it was very similar to me, and it happened prior to COVID. I had bought my business partner's shares, and I felt I was alone in the business. The prior year was the only year that we lost money on the business. We had never lost money, and that year I was buying the company that had just lost money. I was exiting or ending a relationship with a CEO that I had hired for the company.
Yeah.
And it felt just like, the world was closing in.
Yeah.
And that mindset where your mind doesn't stop thinking, right? And you're like a fly hitting the window, like you're stuck and you're not going anywhere.
Yeah.
How were you able to come out of it? And by the way, this was while you were making thousands of calls to EOers, asking them how could you help them. No wonder you won that award.
Yeah, I think, what, maybe it was a good distraction, right? Like you focus on helping somebody else so you don't have to think about yourself. Maybe that's what was pulling me through, maybe because I felt I was making efforts there and not here.
And you find inspiration through it.
Maybe. I don't know. I feel the voice inside my head became very loud, right? Like in this repetitiveness of I'm a failure and I'm struggling. And like I said, I just was not in the right mental space. I was not in the right mental space for myself to come out of it, right? Like, but I think I was trying to support on the EO side, EO members by trying to get them to stay in the organization and trying to get the organization to waive their fees for the year or to give them a subsidy to stay in. And in my business, just like I said, I think I came to the point where I'm like, I'll close as soon as I pay everybody off. And it was that mindset. If I lose, I'm okay, but no one else should lose. All my suppliers should be paid. All my my staff should be paid. And I can't quit until that happens. If it happens and I collapse or the company goes under, but it should go under while I'm trying, not while I'm signing a paper over. And so I think that was just through that process, fighting it out, slowly things started to turn.
Who was most helpful in that time for you?
Gosh, a lot of people.
Was there an angel there that said something in a special moment, or?
I think at that time, what you need, I think when your confidence is at an all-time low, you need the love and support of the people around you. So, my wife, it's hard. I think as a husband, you always think, how do I provide for my family? As a father, how do you provide for my family? How do I do that? So, having an understanding wife who is happy to share the burden with you and support you and be like, it's just a phase, you'll come out of it, is super important. My mother, who never loses her maternal instinct, is always there to remind you that she's always there for you, which I think is a very powerful thing. And then your circle of your friends and those people, you really start to know who the real ones are. And I don't mean the real ones in terms of who give you financial aid or who do it, but the ones who are really there for you, you start to know. I don't know what the needle is. It's a feeling. It's not something they necessarily do or say, but those are the ones that you who pull you through, I think.
Oh, that's really valuable. Thank you for that. Is there a book that touched you in a moment in your life that you said, wow, this is amazing, this is a great takeaway I'm taking, I had to read this in this moment, or a book that maybe changed you in an aspect?
You know, the book I read probably during that moment was, and it's not a book I read for the first time. I read it when I was younger, but it was gifted to me by a friend. I remember she was going away to university, and we were in school together, and she was going away, and she gave me a book, The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho, and I hadn't read it for a long time, but something told me at that time, just read it again, and I did, and it again just reminds me of the journeys that we are on, and when we think we're close, another thing takes us on a different path, and also just to be open to the possibilities around us. And so again, I think, you know, serendipitously, it's one of those things that you feel like this is the book I need to read right now, and I reach for it, and in that moment it speaks to me in a different way than probably what it spoke to me 20 years ago.
What is something that when you do, time passes quickly, something you're passionate about?
I'm very conscious of the time with my children. If I could be the best thing at anything in the world, I just want to be the best dad. Like that is where everything goes. And I see it now, right? Like I see, this role is a sacrifice. You give up a lot, you know this as well. You give up a lot of time away from home to be here. And so when I'm with my kids, I'm very concerned about time, but also because I think I was reading a statistic, right? Like you spend 75% of your life with your children up until they're 18. And so in the back of my mind, I'm like, okay, I'm counting it down of how many more years. And then I think it's interesting with kids because they go through phases, right? Like as they grow up, baby, toddler, young kid, preteen, teen, they're different people. So that last person is gone now. And who's this? You know, my 11-year-old is no longer my 8-year-old is no longer my 11-year-old, right? So it's a different kid almost. But I'm just trying to cherish these moments with them.
I love that. Is there a movie that you recommend, or your favorite movie?
Gosh, I was thinking about this. Such a tough question. I don't know if I have a favorite movie. I'm going to say it's not my favorite movie, but it's one of my favorites. The Godfather. It was on the plane while I was driving down. Like it was flying.
The Godfather.
Down. Yeah, I love The Godfather. There are too many movies to name. I can tell you. I love.
That's a classic.
It is a classic. I love watching Denzel Washington as an actor. So I love Denzel Washington movies. I know he's not in The Godfather, but he's someone who I love listening to and speaking. So
he's a great. How do you download information? How do you become a better human being? How do you gain knowledge?
I would say, I would say it's a variety. But what I've noticed is it's who am I downloading it from? So, for example, it's not just books; it's certain books. It's not just podcasts; it's certain podcasts. It's not just YouTube clips; it's certain ones, right? Like so, or not just people; it's certain people. So I think I don't know what it is. You and me, I remember before we were talking about frequency. I don't know if people speak at a certain frequency that attunes to my ear. I don't know if it's one thing. So I think I learn from all different places, but I notice that there are certain people, when they say it, it resonates more. You know, if 10 people say the same thing to you, maybe it's one person you hear it differently from. Does that make sense?
Yeah, like you're paying a little extra attention, it would seem.
Yeah.
You needed to hear it from, like my wife tells me all the time, like I told you 100 times, yeah, but I needed to hear it from him.
Yeah. I think this is my wife's favorite joke with EO, right? Like, so she'll tell me stuff all the time and I don't do it. And then I'll come back and I'll be like, oh, we're going to do this. She's like, how did you know? Oh, Kenny told me. She'll be like, because you heard it from EO, right? Like, so, I don't know what it is. I think there are certain people, there are certain mediums or people that I hear things from that resonate stronger.
Nice.
Maybe it's a writing style, maybe it's a tonality, maybe it's
If you could give a piece of advice, maybe it would be a sentence or a paragraph takeaway to Jamie, 18-year-old Jamie? You go back in time and you say, hey, Jamie, I have to say this to you. It's going to be helpful during your lifetime.
One thing I wish one thing I wish I did more was have more discipline. And so I don't know if I said it to 18-year-old Jamie, would it make a difference? But it's something that I would remind him. I try to tell my kids this all the time, right? Like, try to pass things that we don't do to our kids. And I tell my kids, like, passion will only take you so far. Motivation will only take you so far. That's not what carries you. What's going to carry you is the discipline. It's going to be, can you do this when you are feeling down, when you are feeling sick, when you are not in the mood, when it's raining? Are you able to push through and do it? Because if you can do that consistently, I think that is the key. We can all get motivated for a day, for a month, for a week, but that's not enough. The people who go to the gym every new year, start the new year motivated, let's go out and lose 5 kilos. It's the discipline. It's like, can you do it? And I would tell younger Jamie that. I don't know how I could really have him listen to it. Maybe I have to get somebody else to tell him. But yeah, I think that's the key. One.
If you could send a message to starting entrepreneurs or aspiring entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs who are maybe having a difficult time and they want to get through it and be in a different part of their journey, what message could you send to them?
Starting entrepreneurs, I'd say, what's the problem you're trying to fix? And how many people is it a problem for? I think that's key. I think sometimes, and I've been through this, right? Through many failed businesses. I think it's a business, but it's like really nobody cares apart from me, so it's not a business, right? So what is the problem you want to fix? I think for the ones going through, for the ones who are just in that phase, understanding what kind of business you want to be. Are you chasing growth? So VC, raising money, or you trade, or do you just want to be profitable, and where do you want that balance to be in terms of your life and in terms of what you give? I think being clear about that is super important. And the ones who are struggling, I would say, how badly do you want it? In terms of like, how much do you want to push forward, keep going for it? But also understanding when is the right time to quit. Like, and I think it's really hard. Like, I think those are such difficult introspective moments to have. But
I think there's an interview with the founder of NVIDIA that they ask him, regarding entrepreneurship, and he says, if I would have known it would have been this difficult, I would have never done it. This reminds me to that Churchill saying, if you're going through hell, keep going.
Yeah. It's interesting, right? So, you have entrepreneurs, you have serial entrepreneurs, you have entrepreneurs who come out of their first business, if it's acquired, sold, or closed down, right? Like, and they struggle to do something else. And sometimes it's because they don't know what to do next. But sometimes because they know how hard it is. You know what I mean? It's like when you climb the mountain for the first time, you're like, it's easy and climb. And then when you get the second one, you're like, no, I remember how hard it was to do the first one. I don't want to do the second one. But again, I think that's where the discipline, the motive, all those things come into play. Like, are you able to push through?
You gave a great speech at the Global Leadership Conference of EO in Singapore a couple of months ago.
Thank you.
And you gave a great message. First, I would like you to share how did you become that great speaker? And second, I would love to understand your message of that CEO for you.
Yeah. So how did I become a great speaker? I still don't think I'm a great speaker. I was so nervous the day before. I've never spoken to a room more than 20 people, maybe 30 people, like just as a chapter or regional chair. And that's usually a quick thank you. So, when they say you're going to give a 15-minute speech to 2,000 people, I remember going into rehearsal, looking around and being like, oh my gosh, this is a big room. Like, there's a lot of people in here. I definitely practiced. So it's not something that came overnight. Like, I really practiced because I felt the pressure. When you will know this next year. When you are the chair, a lot of people wait for that speech. A lot of people want to know what you are going to say. So, a lot of thought, a lot of energy, a lot of practice to go in it. And I worked with, a great company, Rich Mulholland's Missing Link really helped me hone that message and prepare me for it. And in that process, that message of that's EO for you was something that we came to when they started to ask me what is important to you, why this organization, why now, and that's EO for you is two parts. The first part is that the change that happens in your life, and I gave the story in my speech, where I start to go when I join EO and I start to do these things, I start to go through a transformation, and just like I said earlier, when you're in the gym, you don't notice on day one. But maybe after a month, you look at yourself and you're like, oh, I'm in a better place, or I look fitter, or I'm healthier, or so on and so forth. And I remember saying to somebody like how EO had changed my life in all these ways, and his response was, yeah, what do you expect? That's EO for you. Like, as in, like, obviously, that's what EO does. And the second part is EO is a personal experience. So that's EO for you, and everything that we have in EO comes from the personal experience we want out of it and where we will seek it. Because for some people, it's going to be starting a business. For some people, it's going to be going through the darkest part of their life. Some people, it might be a divorce. Some people, it might be about raising kids. And EO can provide value for all these people, because I think in EO, with our 18,000 members, or as I referred to them, they're the largest library in the world, 18,000 books, each one has something that can help. And so the story of that's EO for you is two things. One is that what is important to you, go and seek it. And when the change happens, well, what did you expect? That's EO for you. That's how we do it. That's what makes us special.
I love it. Well, my friend, I appreciate a lot this time that you gave us. It's a wonderful interview. I know that it's going to be very helpful for a lot of people.
Thank you.
And hopefully we can have another one in the nearby future.
Absolutely. We're going to spend a lot of time together, so absolutely.
I love it. Well, thank you very much, my friends.
Thank you.
It was a great time with Jamie Pujara, our EO Global Chair. And please continue listening to us, seeing us. I think this is a great space for that. And if you can go and follow us in Spotify, rate us. If you rate us high, that would be most appreciated. And if you rate us low, please don't do it. Just follow. Thank you very much for hearing the Lumen Podcast.